Welcome to the Flow of Money podcast.
This is where high performance meets financial intelligence. In these discussions, we combine the performance science of flow and flow states with practical wealth management strategies.
The intent is to build a resource for those who believe that high performance mental states can impact wealth and abundance in all its forms so that you can make the impact you want in the time that you have.
Let's get started. I'm Dave Gieselman, flow state coach, breathwork facilitator, and former chef turned high performance nerd. I help leaders and creatives build clarity, confidence, and capacity, teaching the science of staying cool under pressure so you can think clearly and execute fast, especially when things go sideways.
My name is John O'Dea, and I'm a financial advisor. My love is cash flow. I truly love the cash flow generated by businesses for the positive impact that this cash flow can have on the owners, their employees, and their broader community. And this cash flow is never more important than when the owners of these businesses start to execute their exit and succession plan. I just love it all and can't wait to help.
Fear and flow.
Fear and flow. So it is an unstable world right now. It feels very unstable. What are you saying to people right now who are very concerned about people who are, say, less than 10 years from retirement and watching just the amount, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, watching financial uncertainty sort of play out in real time? I'm less than 10 years from retirement. I'm kind of freaked out. How are you thinking about that? And how are you talking to people about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are clearly times when it feels like change, impending change, has irrevocably altered the model of the assumptions that we're using to make decisions. And I'll give you some examples. 2007, 2008, 2009. Turns out if you look at the numbers from a market value standpoint, while people focus on the crash in 2008, the change in the value of most people's securities actually starts to drop in 2007. And it doesn't really stop for 2 years, the spring of 2009. And there's nothing, if you could back it up and re-experience January, February, March of 2009, was there really information present to suggest that that was bottom? No. It really felt like it's possible that the information and assumptions that we have made no longer apply. And what I am often listening for is for somebody to tell me the magic words, yeah, but this time it's different. So we have the dot-com economic vitality.
Right.
Begin to crumble and fray. A whole host of reasons. And then we have 9/11. And at about the same time, we accelerate down. And then we have little 9/11 hangover. So we have one of the first times in the history of tracking stock market performance using the S&P 500. One of the first times in history down 3 years in a row. Fundamentally doesn't happen, right? We just don't have a statistical probability to say, yes, we have bad years, and occasionally bad years can string out. But we don't have multiple bad years in a row. This time it's different. And it was a very scary time. 2001, 2002, 2003, right? And the aftermath.
I was in restaurants for it. I was in hotels for it. Watching us going, what are we going to do?
Physically unsafe. Forget financially unsafe. Am I physically safe? January, February, March, people are dying and nobody understands. And the suggestion from some of the smartest people that we can find is that the flu-like symptoms appear to kill people and they're being transmitted at a rate such that a global scale pandemic might eliminate a third of the population on the planet. That's 3 billion. That is 100 million people. 100 million people are going to die from the cold? Wow, that's bananas. Like that can't, wow. Right? We can go back to R naught factors and how transmission is attempted to be parsed and, we can get into where it came from and its source, but how do we keep ourselves physically safe and those tools shut everything down? Like, you know what worked in 1918? people stopped going outside for a period of time.
Right.
They got out in front of it, they isolated a little bit, and things petered out. Well, if you take the U.S. economy and you say, look, you can't go outside for some period of time, John, I don't care what you're telling me. This time, it's different. Right? This time it's different. This time it's different. Now, I will tell you, there's no reasonable expectation that the change in the value of the stock market is measured by the performance of the S&P 500 from January of 2020 to December of 2020 should have changed that quickly. I mean, roughly 30 to 40 to 50% drop in the value of things that were super interesting and exciting to own, right, that you thought were going to double in 5 years. All of a sudden, we're almost half what you just paid for. And that rapid a decline. Also, 07, 08, 09, 2 years for that kind of value drop change to take place. This was 90 days, right? 60 days. Like bananas. This time. So the fear, the frustration, the anger, the sadness, the disruption is legitimate, right? You got to look at the assumptions that you're making about the process that you're following, and you need to be curious and open to the fact that information may have changed. Like, there's good data to suggest that we calcify around assumptions about what we believe are true that are no longer true after a relatively short period of time. Like, a vibrant and healthy process is to be skeptical about what is true. I'd have my assumptions about where value comes from and what is a good storehouse of value. I have to challenge the underlying assumptions. Otherwise, I'm going to miss things, right? That the world has changed.
We do that so you are saying that we should do in our financial lives exactly what we do in our bodies, right? What the thing that I went to for comfort, the way that I created a sense of safety and comfort may or may not still be serving me to create either safety or comfort. And so I need to question why I continue to reach for it.
I think curiosity is a superpower. I think openness and curiosity that is present, right, to make sure. Now, it is hard to pair that with science and research-backed process that you've come to rely on, because it can be easy to prove that we as humans and how we are wired can be overly influenced by the most recent piece of information rather than the vast history of all knowledge. Right? The recency bias, we can get anchored to things that may not be relevant. There's all sorts of brain bugs that we are subject to. So you do have to, while curiosity is important, you got to know that you're wired poorly and you may get misattached, right? So you got to go back. It's almost an iterative process to go back and forth, right? To not be distracted by the most recent shiny thing that has just happened.
Or catastrophic thing, or seemingly terrifying thing, or whatever.
Right. And to attempt to hold it lightly, to be curious about its relevance to the impact, to be present for the fact that it is taking place, and to put it in its proper context as best you can, right? And there's not a good science that I've come to, except to say that if your process is accurate, right? If your process, and by process I mean set a goal, evaluate a set of resources that you're going to use to achieve that goal, start putting those resources into place, and monitor that process over time. Right? If that's your process for achieving a financial outcome, I'm going to make more than I spend. I'm going to take that difference and I'm going to purchase a storehouse of value that I'm going to use in the future. The storehouse that I'm going to select, I'm going to have a process for selecting: monitor, manage, select, purchase, and to believe in based on the fundamental assumptions that I have for that storehouse of value, whatever it is. And then that process is you monitor that process, that system is working, that I make more than I spend. I take those resources, I set it aside, and I use those resources to build a repository that is going to be my Superman fortress of solitude, right? The cement foundation that I'm going to operate from in the future as I move towards my goals and objectives. So the process that I follow, in general, can be in and of itself your tool during periods of instability, fear, change, etc. And I'll give you a good example.
Yeah, because that sounds great. So what?
Yep.
What's
Yes.
that mean? I'm just
Yep.
looking at my 401k and I'm wondering, and I'm watching the news and I'm wondering if what's going to happen when the dollar stops being the global currency. Like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And there's always good specific questions. John, I understand. And this time it's different. Like we're talking about global trade denominated in US dollars no longer being true. If we fundamentally understand the economic underpinnings of what US based companies, which has generally been the primary storehouse of value that people have used, Apple, Netflix, Facebook, Google, blah, blah. Right? If I'm buying those companies in my 401k plan and their success financially from a profit and growth standpoint is underpinned by the fact that the US dollar is the global currency denomination, the tool of global trade, right, has to denominate back to the US dollar, and that no longer is true. What happens to the value of these components that I own in an account that I want to use for the future? So one of the things that I take solace in as part of my process, regardless of the tool that you select, and I really don't care what tool you select, real estate, cryptocurrency, daffodils, art, cars, whatever it is, in any marketplace that is purchasing and selling high quality storehouses of value that should be worth more in the future than they are today, has experienced periods of stress and craziness, right? Lack of a better word. And in any of those periods, if you look back historically, what every expert in those spaces wish they had at that time was cash to take advantage. If you decide that rental real estate is the single most important asset that you're going to own over long periods of time, you know what you wanted in 2009 was cash. Because every home was on sale for 40 to 80% off what it was just selling for 2 years ago. And you know what every real estate investor, by and large, didn't have in 2009? Was cash. They had built no system or process for themselves to have something in their lives that behaved differently than their primary resource. But if you do, then could you put yourself in a position where, as much as I am concerned that this time is different, if I look back over the history, and we're talking 2,000 years of storehouses of value, right? If I look over that time period and I realize that in any process and any storehouse of value marketplace that we can look at, there are going to be periods of instability. And my job as an investor is to be ready and prepared to take advantage when that happens. I'm hopefully looking forward to those periods of instability when they show up so that I can take advantage.
Because, okay, from the financial dummy, right? Because if I have cash,
yes,
then I get to take advantage of that.
Yes.
Because everything's gonna get depressed.
Yes.
And if I have cash, if I have liquidity,
if I have something that has behaved differently, cash, something that behaves in almost an opposite fashion to my primary tool in some proportion.
Or at least an independent fashion.
Independent, right? The term we use is correlation. If the value of these things are zero correlation, perfect would be negative correlation. This one goes down and that one goes up in value, right? Then I have something to sell to buy the stuff that I love and my process is built around on the assumption that historically speaking, the vast majority of resources that we're going to select as a storehouse of value, this is never, almost never, unlikely to be a permanent reset down that never recovers. By and large, attractive storehouses of value, especially the ones that I love, businesses, will find opportunities to increase in value over some period of time. You just need to make sure that your goals and your resource are aligned from a time standpoint, right? That most of the opportunity is created when there's a misalignment of time perspective. For example, let's say we're using, rather than rental properties, we're using publicly traded securities. Let's use a share of Apple, for example. If you're owning a share of Apple, because Apple on average grows at 10% a year, I don't know what the number is, but let's say hypothetically it's 10% a year, and you're parking money on the sidelines that you're going to pay your taxes with in 9 months. And you're thinking, here's $100,000 I'm going to pay in taxes. I'm going to buy a share of Apple. Apple grows at 10%. I'm going to make $10,000 while it's parked here waiting to pay my taxes. Awesome. However, the share price of a storehouse of value like Apple, while it may have an average return, it also has a plus or minus of nearly 30%. You have, as an investor, virtually zero control over the short term about the change in value. So you have a misalignment, my perspective, a misalignment of time, resource, goal standpoint. So all of a sudden, Apple, for no reason outside of what Tim Cook and the merry band of leaders are doing at Apple, the share prices of Apple trade at $70 rather than $100, and now you get ready to go pay your taxes and you're short. But if you own Apple because you're planning to retire in 10 years, you're probably not going to die the day after you retire. So if you retire like most people, you're still probably planning to live another 30 years after that. So you really actually have a 40-year time horizon on this storehouse of value. Could it be possible that the merry band at Apple, Tim Cook and his friends, regardless of what the short-term issue is, if you give them 10 years to correct and adjust to whatever this new normal is that you think, John, this time is different, are they going to come up with a new set of products and services that they can deliver to you at a vast margin over what it costs for them to make it such that they can return to profitability in a fashion that they're worth more today than they are, worth more tomorrow than they are today? Then all you really want to do is go buy more. As long as you have the time associated with your goal to wait for recovery. So now we're back to corrections in any marketplace take place. Stock market corrections of 20% or more happen with surprising regularity. We don't know when they're going to happen. We don't know what's going to trigger the value change.
Sure.
And we know it's going to happen. So if that's true, at some point, if you have a resource that you can use to take advantage, somewhere in your portfolio, have something set aside that isn't that risky, that when the stock market goes down, it either doesn't change or it goes up a little bit, so that you could sell that to go take advantage. Are you now leaning forward and hoping for those crazy points in history when the stock market goes down? Could I get you all the way to, man, if we could get you to the point where, yes, it's scary. And historically, these things self-correct, right? For-profit entities are run by smaller people who will generally figure out a path, especially if you own enough of different kinds. They'll figure out a path forward to profit from every disturbance. So part of the challenge tends to be, do you believe that? Do you believe in your storehouse of value? Have you fundamentally done the work to really come to understand these are companies that generate revenue, they have expenses, if there's profits left over, profits go to the people who own the company. If you own the company, if you're a shareholder in your 401k plan, if you own mutual funds and those mutual funds own Apple and Netflix and Facebook and Google and, Domino's Pizza, one of the greatest performing stocks over the last 20 years is freaking Domino's Pizza. It's not Tesla. So if you own those companies and they're run by smart people who will be able to profit from whatever change that happens, especially if it's over a long enough period of time, and you have resources to shelter yourself from short-term stuff. So let's say you are 65. I'm retiring tomorrow. Well, you shouldn't have the money that you're spending next year in the stock market, right?
And therein lies the value of a really good financial advisor.
It can be super helpful. It can be super helpful to build a repository of resources that you're going to spend over the next 3 to 5 years, such that the value change in the rest of your stuff that you're going to spend in your 6 to 40, that has time to recover. You have enough to fill your checking account with the resources you plan to spend and stuff that didn't change a lot, right? And so if you have insulated yourself to some degree over the short term, based on the changes, could you get back to the eagerness? Oh, I'm so excited. The stock market is down 30% because I have stuff that I set aside that I get to take advantage. And so there will be times where it will be very hard to understand on a short-term basis and a long-term basis, what is the meaning of fill in the blank? Decoupling of the global economy from the US dollar as a primary source of exchange. What happens when the US defaults on the gargantuan size debt that it has incurred? What happens if you take 30% of the employed population and you fire them because chatbots can do their job? What happens if, North Korea takes over South Korea? What happens if China takes Taiwan? What happens? Fill in the blank, right? There is very scary, very real, very disruptive things that are likely to take place over the next 10 years that are going to take the perceived value of publicly traded securities down the tubes, at least on a short-term basis. And I do find that while we have talked about the fact that capitalistic-driven organizations, unfettered, without any sort of guardrails at all, could certainly run into trouble, scorching resources from the environment, from the future, from their employees, right? For-profit entities without any guardrails can do as much damage as, anything that we can imagine. However, as a self-organizing principle, the drive to create profit or excess value on the behalf of stakeholders doesn't have to be profit. It could be we as a community are going to farm, right? And we've produced excess, vegetables that we don't need anymore. We now get to trade with people who have trees, right? They've got wood, no places to farm. We grow more apples. We get to trade with them. Now we have wood, they have apples, and it works, right? So I find that the self-organizing principle around creating excess value, smart, capable, mission and purpose-driven individuals can create a great deal of value. Today, as a storehouse of value, the profit-making entities of publicly traded securities, in general, will find ways to deal with the disruptions that are bound to come up. And the fear still is present as part of this conversation. It is still true that it feels at the moment like this time it's different. We have never gone through the process of cascading from a single unified currency to a decentralized, electronic-based form of exchange like a cryptocurrency. That's true. We've never gone through a mode of transportation change like going from horses to cars. We've never gone from paper to computers until we did. There will be super disruptive changes that come. And what that means for your storehouse of value, for the resources that you've saved up that you're going to rely on, there are tools that you can use to attempt to insulate yourself if you're planning to draw from it relatively soon, 3 to 5 years, right, from a value standpoint. If you have some buckets of money set aside in your portfolio that is insulated from the change in value of publicly traded securities, then you're back to aligning your portfolio with your time goals. If you don't, then you're going to be frustrated when the money that you were planning to pull out tomorrow is now worth 10% than what you planned to pull out. Right? That's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to get excited about the down.
Right. So I'm gonna, like many other things, right? What I'm hearing is zoom out. Right? Zoom out. Right? And I, like I said earlier, I think I liken this to what we do in our health. I never know when I'm going to fall and break my leg. Like I never know when when something's going to happen. I'm going to get in a car accident and get injured. If I have taken care of my health up until this point, I am reasonably healthy enough that I can quickly heal a broken leg or move through an illness that is suddenly debilitating. That feels like, oh God, now it's going to be like this forever. I'm going to be in this cast. This cast feels like it's a forever. But I have taken care of myself in such a way that I can move through whatever the current challenge is with grace. And I have invested in storehouses of value that I can trust, right? And that will likely survive. 95% of them will likely survive the next sort of catastrophic shift, right? Disruption,
Yep.
Right? However catastrophic it may feel in that moment.
Yes. Yeah.
And if in addition to that, somewhere I got and this is a terrible analogy, like a bag of cash stashed in a closet somewhere.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So when all these storehouses of value go through this thing, like I can still reach into the bag of cash in the closet, not only pay my rent, but now buy a little bit more of this storehouse value that is temporarily depressed, because we don't believe that any of these things are like going to crash and burn and die and never go.
It is possible, right? It is
well, some of them, but not all of them. If you have a reasonably diversified.
Well, and I mean, we can have a conversation about the fact that there is a chance, right? Just because I've never seen a global collapse that never recovers, right? Doesn't mean that it can't happen, right? The chance of that is not zero. It's incredibly challenging to imagine how small the chance is that happens. And if that happens, it won't have mattered what you did.
Right.
It won't have mattered. Right?
All of the healthy people in plane crashes also die.
Right?
The buffest guy in a plane crash also dies.
It won't have mattered. And so part of the challenge, why mindset and why my interest in flow and breath work that affects mindset that you can manipulate, can you produce for yourself a gap between the emotional reaction that this is a tiger in my bleeping office that is going to eat me, right? To this is a category of a problem or a challenge that I can figure out. Is there a step or a tool or a process that will give you a chance to hear this message? Because part of the challenge is when anger, betrayal, breakdown in trust, misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? If you go through the process of ending up with a breakdown in trust as a part of this process, or shame or anger or any of the negative mental loops that we can get in, there is no way for me to deliver knowledge to you at that point to shift the mindset, right? We got to get back to, is there a way to connect and hear the message? Because at that point when emotions are high, like as we've spent some time talking about before, at the point of that crisis, right? The crisis communication, I can't deliver rational information to you while we're in the middle of a crisis together, right? So could you practice, prepare, or develop a set of tools knowing that you as a prudent human being, to protect your future self and your family, are going to make more than you spend, set that resource aside, and you're going to use that in the future. And if you're going to do that and the value of that is going to change, you need to practice what you're going to do when that feels threatened.
Are you telling me that preparedness prevents panic?
There's a chance. When it happens, as much as I've had a securities license for the last 20 years, that does not inoculate my amygdala, whatever you're going to tell me is the lizard brain center that gets triggered at the fight or flight, freeze, decision-making process. Whatever sympathetic system gets triggered, I don't really get to control the initial response. There might be a window if I've practiced and developed a set of tools, breath work, meditation, practice, right, framing, pattern recognition. If I've put together a series of tools, do I open up a gap post-intervention, right? Stock market's down, somebody's yelling at me, the markets are down across the board, such that I can still operate and deliver value. Emergency room, teams that are working on folks, that all those places where cognitive function is required under periods of a great deal of stress, right? Can you develop those types of skills? Because it might be true that there's a continuum. Like the first thing is do no harm to yourself, right? Can I get you to the point where the vast majority of the data suggests during a period of instability, the first step that many decision makers make is they sell and go to cash to avoid future losses. And most of the data would suggest that's not the right decision. That is very difficult to figure when to sell and when to get back in.
That is the exact, there is a wolf in front of me, turn and run.
Right.
Also the wrong decision in that moment.
Right. I mean, I did work for an investor who had $5 million of investable assets in 2006. Floated up in 2007, and then by spring of 2009, he had $2 million. A big drop. And he just capitulated. I'm out. Can't take this anymore. I'm going to wait for this to stabilize, and then I'm going to get back in. And that was 2009. I met him in 2019, maybe. He was still in cash. Okay. So the size of the economic effect of that decision was, had he done nothing, had he just turned his computer off and walked away and took a nap for 2-3 years, which is hard to do, But had he done nothing, by the time I met him, he would have had $7 million. So can you create enough of a gap from a tool standpoint to at least do no harm? But in a perfect world, could we go a step further where you could turn this into an advantage for yourself? So there's an author out there, I came across this concept and I like it. I like this concept as a way to try to frame what to practice when things are going well so that you're ready and you have this potential opportunity from a framing standpoint when the wolf shows up. Because in the financial world, it's absolutely going to show up. We don't know when, we don't know where, we don't know why, we don't know the source of the wolf, which is why it's a flippin' surprise when it happens. But it's going to show up. We know it's going to show up. All right. So the author wrote Black Swan. He wrote another book that I'm going to reference. But his day job was what's called options trading. He was an options trader. And the analogy is this. He came across the question, what is the opposite of fragile? I ask you this question. Dave Gieselman,
right?
What is the opposite of fragile?
Durable.
Durable, robust, strong, resilient. And that definition falls short. I understand that definition, but it falls short. Right?
Probably flexible and resilient now that I think about it.
It gets closer, but let me give you this example. Let's say we have a wine glass, right? The wine glass is worth $100 because it's crystal. If that wine glass experiences a shock and it's fragile, the value of that wine glass goes down, right? Because it's no longer a wine glass, right? It's a pile of shards. So a good first step would be for that wine glass to be resilient to the shock, that it not break, that it experience the shock and it not go down in value. But that's not really the opposite of something that's fragile. In a perfect world, when that crystal wine glass experienced a shock, it transformed into something else that was more valuable, right? That all of a sudden it went from crystal to gold and it's not worth $100 anymore, it's worth $1,000. And we don't really have a term for the opposite of fragile in this way. Yes, resilient would be great. I at least would like it to not go down.
Right.
But could I get all the way to the point where it's anti-fragile? Like not only does it not go down, but it experiences a shock and goes up in value. Right? Could you get all the way there?
That's wild. I think about, right, and this is why you do what you do and why I do what I do. I think about the body, and a broken leg,
yes,
if set properly,
correct,
feels stronger than before it broke.
How many other examples? Like when you are pursuing fitness, right, the efforts to move a heavy weight has a deleterious effect on your muscle tissue and it repairs itself.
Muscles, right.
Yes. And the human body properly managed could be considered anti-fragile.
Right. No, and it's such a cool analogy and it's such a cool like a cool comparison, but you got to be healthy. It's got to be like everything's got to be ready.
You got to be prepared
to experience that
proper training,
shock.
Support and systems. So there is a promise that is emotional, right? That you might get somebody to as part of the tools that you use to be ready for when the wolf shows up in your home, right? Financially speaking. And it is true that you could help deal with that emotion, right? That you're going to experience. There's nothing that I can do to eliminate the initial response. Right? One of the speakers that I really like who talked about the mental resilience that is offered by, say, meditation is that the Dalai Lama gets angry. He just stays angry much shorter than the rest of us.
Sure.
Right? We're all going to experience the initial reaction, but could you open up a large enough gap where you could get to a profitable reaction to what's going on currently? And you got to prepare and organize. But there are situations where with the right mindset and the right structure, could you, let's take, this podcast we're recording today at the end of July in 2025. Right? And we've seen a lot of disruption during the first half of the year of 2025. So in financial markets, you can describe publicly traded companies as US based or international, companies outside the US. Now, historically speaking, over the last 10 years, US-based companies have from a financial performance standpoint, the patukas out of companies outside the U.S. Right? Companies
That's a
outside
financial term.
kick the patukas.
Yeah.
Correct. That is absolutely 100% correct.
Industry term. Okay.
Companies outside the U.S. traded at a lower multiple while they're profitable and they grow well. They're just not rewarded with same sort of growth premium as, say, Apple or, Google or Amazon, some of the U.S.-based companies, right? So historically speaking, it would almost defy explanation why you would even own companies outside the U.S. Like the U.S.-based companies, their value doubles in almost half the time. Right, companies outside. So why would you even own them? Part of the reason that you might consider owning assets that behave differently during periods of surprising, we're never going to know where it comes from kinds of issues shows up in 2025. I haven't seen it in a long, long time, but now we have, for the first time in a long, long time, companies outside the U.S. kicked the batukas out of companies in the U.S. And if you believe, like I do, that well-run companies in general over long periods of time are going to return to a period of profitability such that they are going to be worth twice as much in 10 years than they are today, rough math, then they just dropped 20% in value. You know what you want to do? You want to go buy some, but you have to have something to sell. Well, what if you had a little bit outside the U.S.? Companies in the U.S. are down 20%. Companies outside the U.S. were up 10%. Right? That's a 30% difference. Now, all of a sudden, you could say thank you to your companies outside the U.S., sell back, and go buy some of the stuff in the U.S. that has just gone down in value and take advantage. Could you put yourself into a position where you're not just robust and resilient, but could you potentially put yourself into a position where you're anti-fragile, where you are profiting, where you're benefiting, where you're mindful of the long term and you have goal, storehouse of value, time frame alignment such that if something beautiful and well run and designed that you love, that you just bought recently is now on sale, you have something available to you to go buy some more. And have you set yourself up in a way where that's so if you get to the process of what you're using, right? What are your goals and objectives? How are you getting there? What are you selecting as your storehouse of value? What are you using to make sure I haven't missed something? I still need to be open and curious about what's going on today, right? There's always a new concept that is coming into my world that I need to pay attention to, and very, very, very few of them are present in a fashion where they shift fundamentally how I recommend people pick storehouses of value. Give you an example. Wasn't that long ago when there was a sense that cannabis-related companies were going to change the nature of how we entertained our and we were going to create billionaires overnight. And so I had to figure that out. I had to figure out, hey, do I need to recommend to my clients that they need to evaluate, purchase, monitor, and manage cannabis-related for-profit entities? And I was out. I spent some time looking at it, and I tried to understand the economic models, and still legal at the federal level. And we got compliance issues, we got banking issues, we have insurance issues, we have audit problems, like a publicly traded security needs to be audited, and I'm not sure I'm getting a good audit from people that I recognize. And I was out, right? This is a consumer product. It's either a farming issue, right? Or it's a consumer brand. Farming doesn't grow that fast. Like for a farmer to increase profitability on a rapid basis, would it buy more land? Like, I don't know how they double their profit. They're a farmer, right? Consumer brand associated with entertainment, intoxicants, whatever you want to describe. There's really bright incumbents there that have to win this game, and I don't know how they let somebody else beat them, right? I mean, if you make a beer or a wine or a tobacco or a pharmaceutical, like, you have to own that marketplace. So has the world changed? Is this time it's different? The trend is going to head this direction. I got to be curious and make sure that I don't get attached to what I believe is true is going to always be true, right? I got to be able to be present for them. But I also got to make sure that I'm not just anchoring to the most recent thing that I've seen, but recency bias, hindsight. There's a lot of, problems that I'm going to have in seeing the data, and I got to figure out how to play those together.
It's such a This is why our conversations are so cool. It's why the overlap in what we do is so cool. The nervous system, you get a new hit of something scary. The nervous system does not care what it looks like. Or doesn't care what it is. It only cares what it looks like. It only cares, have I experienced something like this before, and what did I do with it? It doesn't get curious. And I think that's that recency bias. That's that thing, understanding that really anything can happen. Right. And so I need to heal old stuff, right? So that it doesn't show up and pretend to be facts. So the next time, kind of a tough flu, rolls through the city, I'm not panicked about the next global pandemic. Right. And I'm healthy enough to kind of ride out whatever is going on and go, well, this is going to be fine. Like whatever it is, I'm not so atrophied that 12 weeks in a boot, takes me completely out of the game. Right. Like I'm not gonna lose every bit of muscle that I have.
We need the continuum, right? We can't get to anti-fragile unless we've built a foundation of robustness, right? We need to at least be resilient to the surprise or the shock that's going to show up to even have a chance to profit, right? In terms of that process. So use the broken leg example. Have I positioned myself from an income standpoint, a cash flow standpoint? Do I have 3 to 6 months of my living expenses just sitting in my checking account staring at me, such that if something happens to me and my income drops for a period of time, I don't care, right? I got that walled off and taken care of. I'm not on credit cards. I'm not hitting up my friends and family. I've put myself in that situation because I spent less than I made and I set that aside. And then when I got my cash reserves done, then I started to buy future reserves, right? So I have my reserves, and maybe I'm going to take some of that money that I spend and I'm going to get some tools or resources to share that risk with institutions. Insurance, right? I've
Sure.
got health insurance, disability insurance. There's all sorts of things where you might consider, not require, but have I built a robust, to some of the surprises that we're commonly exposed to? Health issue, job issue, financial issue, income issue, stock market issue, right? There's all physical, emotional, financial, spiritual, like all the domains that you might consider important. There's going to be shocks and surprises that shows up in each one of them. Have you thought through a risk management tool to build robustness as best as possible, such that you're stuck on the couch finally getting to write your book, right? To free your space to do your podcast with your friend John O'Dea, right? Is there a way that you could have positioned yourself where somehow as part of this process, not only are you robust and resilient to the surprise, but you have positioned yourself to take advantage in some capacity where not only are you more valuable on the other side, but you waltzed your way through it to some degree.
Sure. And so, yeah, I love this. So this is about, when I look at the body, this is about building health, building healthy response to
Yes.
to fear, building healthy response to the unknown, which means not everything is like the big scary thing. Like I'm not telling stories the moment they happen. So it's that pause. That is this that thing, or is it something else? And what can I learn here? Like where's the opportunity?
Yep.
Right. And so when that wolf actually shows up in the pathway, I have thought about, I'm not only ready to kind of stand there and stare at it, but I also have some beef jerky in my pocket. and now not only do I now have, I didn't turn and run, which means I immediately became food.
You didn't get eaten, right?
Right.
You didn't get
immediately became a prey, a prey animal.
Yep.
But I've now leveraged what I had in my pocket, which I could comfortably carry around, right?
Because wasn't a burden.
You never do know, right?
Right.
You never do know what's going to pop up.
And beef jerky is tasty. I mean, you might need to eat it yourself, right? You might need a little protein boost.
But I now have a friend of a wolf.
Yes.
I now have a friend of a wolf. I have now leveraged that thing that was a huge and terrifying true challenge, like a true devastating, potentially devastating thing, I've now leveraged that through. Okay, I'm absolutely certain that turning and running is not the way to go.
Right. I remember Gieselman and O'Dea talking about this thing.
I remember Gieselman and O'Dea talking about this thing. Not only that, but I understand that there are wolves where I am going.
Yes.
I'm gonna take a bag of jerky with me.
Yes.
Because you never do know. And if I can, even if I can't make a friend of this, I can go, hey, yo, wolf, here, go get it.
Go over there. Yeah. Chase this. Yeah. I mean, it's hard, right? We've talked about this. You don't learn to fight the first time you fight, right? I mean, you don't, working on your golf swing in the middle of your tournament doesn't work, right? Learning to address in whatever domain that's going to trigger a stress response, and that the stress response you're likely to pursue is not in your best interest, right? What's your strategy to be ready for that, right? Are you going to slowly, exposure, we use exposure therapy, we're getting exposed to heights, or, right, you have some sort of issue you want to improve. Is it, are there stories that you can start to learn to apply to frame and pattern recognition? This is wolf. I know how to deal with this, right? This is, a tool that my daughter taught me as she was dealing with emotional stresses. She was taught a tool, right? Is this, am I, halt, right? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? This is coming up for me. That curiosity then allows me to look at it. It's a tool to use at that time, right? In the, flow of, finance or money or process, your ability to be present for the surprise and to try to decouple whatever meaning we attached to that number, right? My wealth, my identity, the sense of betrayal, who I am, my importance, right? The feelings of risk that I'm going to fail my family, that we're going to run out, and I'm going to have to explain to my team, hey, we don't get to do the things that we want because I misapplied this, or I made the wrong decision, or I trusted the wrong person, or I was harmed in some capacity, right? In my effort to pursue the best possible concepts and ideas to apply for the benefit of my family, I got swindled or tricked or whatever it is, right?
Misguided, whatever.
I am introduced to clients all the time to try to undo the damage that somebody else has done to them as this individual attempted to pursue for their own benefit the best possible concepts and ideas. And they found stuff that was toxic, right? That was unhelpful. And this happens in every domain.
In every domain.
Every domain. I want religious improvement, right? You go looking for a good restaurant. I want religious growth and development. I want physical shape, right? I want to be healthier, so I take this pill, right? There's all sorts of things that we come across that are very, very hard to parse at the time. Is this really in my best interest? And so, there can be all sorts of shocks that show up that have nothing to do with the devaluation of the U.S. currency or tariff policy or lack of immigration or too much immigration or not the right immigration or artificial intelligence and how that changes the nature of the workforce or clean water or U.S. debt or taxation or global pollution, global warming, right? I mean, part of the challenge in addition, and it's not always easy to frame, and in many domains, we are delivered experiences electronically in a fashion that is designed to trigger these emotional responses. That I feel safer as part of a tribe, especially when there's an enemy.
Sure.
To be afraid of and angry at an other. Not only does the other identify me, an other that I can look at and point at and debase and ignore or, demean, right? As long as there's an other that I can point to in that negative fashion will, by all accounts, make me feel bigger, stronger, right? That we call as social media phenomena, whatever you want to describe. But the for-profit entities that are designed and paid based on the amount of time that your eyeballs stare at that screen have figured out the math associated with the meat between our ears and how it works, right? And how to tweak it. And so the experiences that we are delivered electronically are not necessarily designed to produce insight or wisdom or help support informed decision making that are in your best interest. They're designed to create an experience so that you watch. And so it can be an example of some of the conversations that can be helpful to try to decouple some of the energy that we misapply to a specific decision. We are energized about something that is going on in the world, and we have every right to be energized about it. And we often will apply that energy in what appears to be a related field or issue. Right? We're angry about who got elected. Over the last 20 years, somebody was always angry about who got elected.
Sure.
There is still, as far as I'm aware, no 100% landslide. Right? There are still people out there who voted for the other person. So I get phone calls, regardless of who's elected, that the world is coming to an end, that I believe the currently elected individual is going to trash the planet in a very meaningful, permanent, and irrevocable. And I can sympathize with the perspective of my counterparty in that conversation. And yet, in many instances, the energy that they have for the specifics associated with their perspective, very little of it has anything to do with the leadership's team ability to build and grow a profitable, shows up as a change in the value of their 401k. That we will misapply anger and frustration around a particular issue to the change in the value of our 401k plan, despite the fact that there's very little, here in 2025 in California, there's a great deal of energy on both sides associated with the immigration, customs, and enforcement activity in Southern California. A great deal of energy, as it should get our energy. There's energy to be had to understand and identify. That is going to have nothing, virtually nothing, to do with 99% of the for-profit companies in the world and their ability to make beautiful things and charge it more than it costs them to make. Paper clips, little white cubes of paper with portions of glue on one side. So one of the questions can be about getting very specific. Before we get into it and before I jump to conclusions, Dave, I really appreciate your question about what happens in my investment account should the US dollar no longer be the primary currency that is used for global. Before we get to that, what specifically are you concerned as it relates to your investment account? Before I jump to conclusions, what specifically, and it could fill in the blank on the issue.
Right.
It doesn't matter. But if you can start to narrow in back to your process, what specifically are you concerned about this affecting the process that you've laid out for yourself in terms of goal or objective, make more than you spend, set that aside and buy resources that we collectively, you believe are going to be worth more in the future than they are today. And by future, I mean a decade or more, 7 years or more, 5 years or more from today. Right? 5 years takes us out of current administration at a minimum.
Right.
So what specifically are you concerned about? So we can get into the details. Because you may find a participant in that conversation may find that as they turn their curiosity and point it at that question in particular and connect it to their process, that some of this starts to loosen.
Sure. No, I deal with the same thing with high performers, leaders. There's a thing going on in their life, in their business or their whatever. And I am now wrapped in, I'm locked in fight or flight. I am locked in my sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
Right. And getting people to go, okay, take 2 steps back.
Right.
Take 3 deep breaths.
Yep.
And it's always the same 2 questions, right? What is the actual fear? Right? Not the whole, I don't care about the story.
Yes.
I am clear about the story. What is the actual fear?
Yes.
Right? And then what is the story I am telling myself about that fear? I have to identify the fear independent of the great narrative. And then I have to identify what is the story I am telling myself about that fear. And the example I use on that is, the email from an angry client, right?
Yes.
And I go from there's an email from an angry client, that just popped up, and I see it, and I see that subject line, and I go from this client is angry to pushing a shopping cart, talking to myself
Yes.
in about 3 seconds.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
This person is going to fire me,
Yes.
ruin me on Yelp, ruin me on Google
Yes.
reviews. My phone will never
Ever.
ring again.
Ever.
It will never ring again. And my wife is going to leave. I am going to be destitute.
Yeah. Yes.
There will be, and nobody. I will become a pariah in the health and wellness space. I will become a pariah in the peak performance space.
Yes.
There is no recovering from this, and I get it. And so being able to having the tools in that moment to go, first off, stop and breathe. Okay? The heart sends 60 times more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. If I want to control my brain state, I have to control my heart rate. If I want to control my heart rate, I have to control my respiration. Stop, breathe, slow the heart rate down. What is the actual fear? The actual fear is that this client could ruin my business and ruin my financial future forever.
Yes.
And the moment I can even articulate that is my fear,
Right.
it vanishes, because it's just simply so far from anything that, all right, maybe not a non-zero possibility, but whatever. I mean, protons decay, protons, like there is a 1 in 10 to the 34th possibility that every single one of the protons in my body could decay at the exact moment, and I would just vanish. There's not a zero possibility of that happening. There is a mathematically identifiable.
It is non-zero.
It is non-zero.
It's
right?
near zero.
It's near
but
zero.
It's not zero.
It is not zero. Right. So, but the moment I can take that fear, like you said, out of my amygdala, push it through the filter of language. So now I can identify. So here's the actual fear. This angry client, which, by the way, I assure every single client at some point in our arc, not only am I going to make you angry, you are going to be furious with me.
If we don't get there, we're not doing it right.
Right. It's kind of my job. So not only is that so the story now, I've identified the fear, and the story that I'm telling is that I didn't intend to make this client mad, like all this, and then now I can identify the story. And just like the fear, the moment I can push that story through the filter of language and really tease out what I'm telling myself. Like, how many things would have to go wrong in the exact same moment for me to end up homeless? Like, for me to end up a pariah, for me to be completely unresourced in all ways,
right?
From where I am currently. I have set up, forget financially, forget in my health, I have set up goodwill with so many humans in my life by being giving, loving, generous, understanding that the value of building communities is that I could experience catastrophic loss.
Yes.
And not experience catastrophic loss.
Yes. Yes. So as I add to that yes and, right, as we improv our way through this, my curiosity for the person experiencing it is not to call it into question or to see that I will tell you that as I'm learning my own sense of meditation, as an idea or a distraction comes up, as you get curious to see it, it does dissipate. But my reason for bringing it up is not to tell you that, hey, if we talk about this and we look at it, it's going to dissipate, don't you worry. No, it's to I want to fix this. Help me not to deny it or reposition it or tell you it's not relevant or doesn't apply or you're misapplying this fear or anger. For me to help you apply it productively, we got to understand how it applies to your process. This process that you've got this energy that you are concerned applies to this process. You're frustrated that this new member of the political class is going to crush your ability to retire. Awesome. What in particular helped me understand that? In many instances, that process turns into what you described, right? That what is the actual fear, right? And what would need to happen for that to show up? Now we can have this conversation, not to deny it, but to say, okay, what are the practical realities if I'm Tim Cook at Apple and this process is going on, and I have the smartest people on the planet, just like at the Fed and others, to really understand and predict the changes in market climate and dollars and denomination, blah, blah. What do I do if that happens such that I can reward my shareholders with growth? Like, what do I do? So there's this conversation potentially taking place all over. You might be able to get to whatever the concern is and really understand it, lay out, questions or curiosity we still need to research to better understand. Is this truly so? Is really this the first time that it's different and I got to deal with that? And there will be a time when something shows up and it is different. I could be wrong, right? That when somebody says this time it's different, it's never different. There may come a time when I'm wrong. I can't go into it thinking you're stupid. But you got to tell me in particular, specifically, what is this issue and how does it apply? Because it may be that while the feeling is present and frustrating and needs attention, it's not necessarily going to affect what you think it's going to affect in the way you think it's going to affect it. So like the client email, right? So when I fail to deliver in a fashion that it really feels like my client has been harmed, right? To some degree, if I'm doing my job in a way that I really am operating from a fashion where I care for this person, I will deal with my grief later that I messed up, right? And what I need to do is make sure that I get this human to the best place possible, regardless of its impact on me. But I can't get to that mind space unless I can create a gap, which is almost impossible to do, between their interaction with me and my reaction. And my reaction is initially catastrophic. I think highly of my own intent. I intend to do good things. I intend to have a positive effect. And is it possible that I screw up? For sure.
100%.
Okay? Now, there's a freaking wolf in my eye. Like, I have screwed up, right? And the difficulty for me to recover and interact in a fashion that is positive for that person who is experiencing this emotion is hard. But if I can get to that and decouple what in particular is my emotion coming from, right? As you're teaching me to process my own reaction, and I got fears and concerns that I may be able to take some energy out of so that I can get back to doing good in whatever fashion that I can. Now, my ability to do good may be limited based on whatever harm I've created. But how do I deliver, at least from a process, if people are going to hire an artificial intelligence generated Brad Pitt Zoom screen and they're going to be able to pick their Brad Pitt financial advisor and go through that process, and I'm no longer employable, okay, but
at least you'll have a career in podcasting.
I have a podcast. But yeah, the challenges we started at the top, right? The emotional reactions that we have: money, value, retirement, wealth, care for our families, financial security. I mean, these are sticky and entrenched and overlapping issues of identity where small changes or concerns can, in a very real sense, put families in jeopardy, right? I mean, if you are hoping to work through age 70, right, and you have a good job and you're making more than you spend, and you're setting that aside, but really financial security for you, that date or point in time when working became voluntary, was 70 because of a variety of choices or situations or trade-offs, whatever. And something happens in your life that now prevents you from working to 70, job change, economy, health issue. Like, this is not an insignificant challenge. Now we're talking about how do you scale back in a fashion where you're not eating dog food out of a can at 90? And we're trying to make a guess about a future that is nearly unknowable, but to point in that direction. And it's hard. That emotional content is not zero. And I can appreciate that. And we still have to figure out how to move forward in a constructive fashion to make decisions, to move the ball. I mean, husband and wife, we talk about statistical averages. There's a chance that between a husband and wife, one of them may need a care need in their 80s that lasts a meaningful period of time that really has a destructive effect on their health.
Right.
And
as we are living longer and longer lives, that possibility continues to grow.
And there's going to be that relationship where both of them have it, right? One of them has, Parkinson's, and the other has cognitive decline. Like a nuclear bomb drops on that family, financially speaking, be mad. You're entitled, angry, frustrated, sad, betrayed, yes. And we're going to need to make decisions. And as much as that triggers for me, I got to get my care somewhere else because I got to be present in the moment with that family when their wolf is right flipping there and they got no beef jerky in the pocket. Right? That wolf is nibbling.
Which means your nervous system needs to be on point.
I have to have my own tools. I have to have my own tools, my own mindset, my own practice, right? As I'm prepped and ready, it can't just be sympathy for them, right? It has to be, present and available. And then, much as many of these professionals who deal with high stress situations, you don't get your own personal care, from your care community. You have to get it somewhere else, right? The psychiatrists and psychologists have their own psychiatrists and psychologists, right? They got to unburden and decouple from the stuff that they're carrying triggers up for them, right? And you got to have your own process.
And high performers need to perform in the moment, right? And get it elsewhere, right? You don't get to take care of yourself in this moment. Your job is to take care of the people who need care, right? So high performers, right? Which means that in the moment you need to have your own nervous system regulated. So when your clients, John, call you and they are completely dysregulated around this political figure and this situation and this company is doing this and that, and what does this mean? Your own fears around whether they're upset, whether
I'm going to lose a client, I'm going to get sued,
right.
I'm going to get triggered. Like, as an investment advisor, my background is publicly searchable and easily findable. That's the whole point. I've done somebody harm financially. You need to be able to find that. Like, my reputation is not a durable, it's incredibly fragile. And at some point I got to wade into that issue. Even so, this is where some of the euphemistic term is sandwich generation, right? The parents who are caring for kids at the same time that they're caring for their parents. Right? Their sandwich between is so brutal, right? Because it can sometimes be true that in your effort to spend yourself to care for your kids, you would like to receive care from somewhere else. And that used to be your parent, right? They poured into you. And now all of a sudden, that place where you went for safety and care to be filled so that you could go back to your kids and be present for them is now also a source of drain. And it just like unmoored, decoupled from your ability to find where do I get and go to your siblings, and that doesn't work because now you're just triggering each other, right? Sibling shit that you're trying to undo from when you were 8 and 10 or whatever it is.
Right.
Right.
And this is where your own practices are going to save you every single time, either with your partner or with somebody else, with your best friend. When I work with super high performers, one of the first questions I ask is do you have a best friend? Like, do you not do you have a partner? Because
and Jim Beam doesn't count.
Right.
Jose.
Yeah, no. Do you have a best friend? Do you have someone? Do you have a ride or die that isn't your wife or your husband or your whatever?
Yes.
because the ability to regulate a nervous system, the ability to get care when we need it, right? And which may not be in the moment, our ability to continue to build and nurture new relationships over the course of our life is important. And one of the big markers for not only longevity but quality longevity is the ability to create, to inspire and nurture and cultivate new, close, intimate, non-sexual, intimate relationships that way when our best friend from third grade dies, we are not alone in the world with a partner or whatever. We have resources. And I think that goes back to that bag of cash, right? That continuing to cultivate that sort of bag of cash, that resource somewhere. Do I have resources in my life when everything
All the
burns to the
domains.
ground?
Right?
Do I have
Physical,
places
emotional, spiritual, relational, like all the domains that are critical for what somebody would consider a well-lived life. Do I have not just resilience and robustness, but the tools to be anti-fragile and the capability to build connection and relationship, intimate, non-sexual relationship, just seems gone. Right? It's just hard, right? But that tool, right? That community, that connection, that relationship. There was some reference that I saw somewhere and it just stuck with me that, where we as humans have lost that capability to be that ride or die for somebody else as much as we want it for ourselves. Either we're overly selective or I don't want to be it for that person because they're sort of smelly, or I don't know how we bridge this gap to get to this. But who's that person that, when the phone rings at 3 a.m., they're just yes and.
Right. And how many of us have that? I mean, I know I
Or
talk to a
that,
lot
or
of people
capable to
are that.
Yeah.
Not only have that, but are that, right? And I think about how many people could call my phone at 3 a.m. and I would either answer, it's funny because my phone doesn't ring, because I have my night mode.
Sure.
But, and sure, my wife, my son, are on the ring through.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
But there are also, like, my best friend is on the ring through, right? My best friend it will absolutely wake me up in the middle of the night. And
Are you ring through worthy?
Yeah.
Dave, are you ring through worthy?
Right. And how many people am I willing to be? Am I willing to, like, out of bed, into car, in whatever condition I'm in? How many people in my life, and am I that person to other people? I think is a really good thing to explore. Because that's that bag of cash in the closet.
I got my go bag. The car is moving. Where do I show up? There's a shovel in the back and a couple extra tools. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. I'm going to get in motion. I'll call you and you're going to tell me where I'm going. Right. And I think that in many ways that is that bag of cash.
Same idea, right?
That's that
building that process
and knowing that it's there. Like, knowing that it's there gives me strength. Knowing that it's there is part of that thing that gives me pause. Right? I can survive catastrophic failure for 6 months.
Lengthens the gap, right? It lengthens the gap between wolf and reaction. That there's needy stuff in there that you packed in ahead of time.
Intentionally
Packed in ahead of time. So that when it opened up, it all of a sudden, is one of those one-way gears where it isn't going to close down that quickly back to the reaction. That you've packed some stuff in there that if you open it up, a bunch of shit drops in and it's not going to come back. There's a chance. And I think that's right. I think that dealing with emotionally charged, challenging situations is a life skill. I think curiosity is a superpower associated with that. I think that opens up the fact that I might be wrong, which shifts the mindset to some degree to be curious about what is present and true.
Or the belief that what has always been true may no longer be.
I listen, the things that I used to believe, I can't believe anymore, right there. I have to grow and develop. But I also have to be willing to resist it some, not to the degree that it's a pathology, that I'm, this is where Csikszentmihalyi, the flow state guy, right? This is where you can calcify around what you've always done and the way that you've always done it in a fashion that you die. The growth and development, this flow state triggers around the change and the difficulty, right, associated with it, right? The shift in mindset that comes from, I gotta reinvent a little bit, right? You gotta be open to that.
The difference between calm and comfortable. We die in comfortable, right? But the ability to remain calm under just about any circumstance requires a ton of work. And so many people confuse or conflate calm and comfortable. Like that person is calm, he must be comfortable in the situation. No, but I'm clear that the situation is A, temporary, and B, I know my way through it. Or if I don't know my way through it, I can find my way through it, which is very different from comfortable.
Yeah, you see that language in places where intuitive brilliance and smartness and training and education are required to survive, right? That slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That shows up in military context, right? In terms of, in the point of an emergency, right? You don't rise to the level of your aspirations. You fall to the level of your training, what you've practiced and are capable of. And I remember my son running towards a restaurant, didn't see a metal bar, smacked his head, cut it open, and forehead cut, just blood everywhere, right? You cut your forehead, and blood everywhere. And the reaction of the community around him was varied from very emotional and energized to, right, we got blood, we're going to figure this out, let's, head back to the car, right? And, you got to have some amount of calm. I don't want that to happen. And, you got to be able to be present for it in a fashion where we can move forward. And denial's not the right, there's a balance, right? Calm and denial can feel very similar.
Yeah, no. When the shit hits the fan, human beings look for the calmest person in the room. That person is automatically the leader, right? Automatically. When chaos hits,
yes,
humans look for the calmest person, right? Because that person obviously has, like, the belief is that person has information that I don't have.
The strength and the conviction that is communicated. Right? What is communicated with strength and conviction, delivered in a calm demeanor, right? We see this in my business all the time, right? The communicator that delivers a clear and concise and confident message during periods of instability instills a greater confidence in the right steps to take than somebody who's academically correct but doesn't have the same connection. And they're several instances where I found my communication wasn't serving my clients, that my emotional triggers, my attempts, my academic focus or science-based research wasn't what was needed. What was needed was different at that time. And in the window that I had to communicate, a calm, an effective and efficient presence and understanding that may outstrip what I felt, right? But was delivered as an interesting puzzle.
And it's great, and that comes through practice, right? It comes through knowing what I will do in a situation. What am I going to do, right? And just the same way we opened this conversation, you don't want to learn to fight in a fight,
right?
And so I think another great conversation that serves both the mind, the body, the high performance and the financial, all areas is intentionality, right? What can I be super intentional about with money, with my body, with my mind, with my cognition, with meditation, with breathwork, with flow state, with all of these things, so that when it all comes out, like I am calm, not checked out, not dissociated, because humans can clock that.
Not denied, right?
Right. Like I can clock checked out. That guy is not calm. He is checked out.
Right. Not locked up, right? Not frozen, because again, that can masquerade. And I've had that experience as well, where during the period of stress, the reluctance to make a decision is more a feeling of freeze rather than it's calm, right?
And people will comfort themselves. I'm just going to sit and I'm just going to wait. You mean you got one toenail to the ground and you're turning in circles and you're not sure what to do and you're terrified that any decision you make is going to be the wrong one? Yeah, that's not calm.
Yeah, fight, flight, or freeze. Freeze is not calm.
Freeze is not calm.
And you got to be able to somehow clock that and identify that too. But yeah, in the flow of wealth, flow of money, flow of cash, right? That flow state practice, whatever domain you're interested in terms of excellence, after a minimum threshold of competence, is no longer the things that you're supposed to do. It's the mindset and mindset tools to make sure that you do them, especially when it's hard. Right? And easier said than done, for sure.
For sure. But if it was easy, everybody would do it. Right?
I would definitely do it.
Lord knows. John O'Dea, another cool conversation. Thank you.
And again, we'll do it again.
Thanks for listening to the Flow of Money podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about John and Dave at theflowofmoneypodcast.com. If you liked this episode, share it with someone who's ready to step into flow. If you're interested in sponsorship or collaboration, we'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Hey, before you go, this is John O'Dea here for the quick note. I am affiliated with Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC, and my investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc. Dave Gieselman, my partner, is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Any opinions are mine and Dave's. These opinions are not necessarily those of Raymond James. Every investor situation is unique, and you should consider your investment goals, risk tolerance, and time horizon before making any investment decisions. Neither Raymond James Financial Services nor Raymond James Financial Advisors render any tax advice. Tax matters should be discussed with your tax advisor. This podcast is for investor education purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment advice. Consult your investment advisor before making investment decisions.